Awesome.
Hi, so we're here today for our green finance conversations, interviews with leading community-based social enterprises who have been making their businesses sustainable and trying to promote sustainable lifestyles across the fields of mobility, housing, goods, products, so on and so forth. And I'm here today with Tanvi Bikhchandani, who's a co-founder of Tamarind Chutney, one of the most interesting, hottest, rising sustainable fashion brands in India today. So welcome, Tanvi. Thank you so much for coming aboard the research and survey and agreeing to do the interview.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. That was a very kind introduction.
So, I think just to start off, I'd be really interested in knowing that how did this journey start? What gave you the idea? What inspired you to start Tamarind Chutney? Where did it come from?
Sure. So I think I co-founded Tamarind Chutney, and my background is in economics, South Asian studies, and also business. So very much not in the design space. And then my co-founder is a textile and apparel designer. So I think both of us approached this field with very different backgrounds and interests. For me personally, I've worked in the development sector for a few years, mostly in education, but I think that sort of got me interested in livelihoods, especially, generating sustainable livelihoods, because I just realized, how important or how transformative that, a secure livelihood is for the entire family, coming from an education perspective. That's sort of the way I was looking at it. So I was more interested in livelihoods. Personally, I like the craft space very much. I mean, I think India has such a rich history of craft traditions. So that was something that I was always interested in on my own. And I wondered if, I could do something in the space that sort of marries livelihood and craft. And that's when I started talking to my co-founder, Charanya, who is one of my very close friends from school. So we go way back. And she was also interested in this space from a design perspective. And we said, hey, why not try something? And so that's how we started in 2019. It was sort of a summer project for us. She was in between jobs at that point. She had quit her job and she was like figuring things out. And I was in business school, and it was the summer holidays between my first and second year. So we just thought it'd be a summer project where, we go like do a pilot, speak to some artisans, source some fabric, and we thought it will finish in 7 weeks. But we had so much fun doing it, and we really felt like, after speaking to various stakeholders, that there is space in the market for an enterprise that not just works with craft, because there are many people that work with craft, but also for and with the crafts person. So that's sort of what we wanted to do with Tamarind Chutney. And I think I haven't mentioned sustainability at all so far, environmental sustainability. And that was something actually that was not a priority when we started, not in the sense that we didn't want to be sustainable, but we were like, we want to work with artisans. So that's how we started. And it was kind of an unspoken agreement between both of us that, of course, we will be sustainable in whatever way we can. So whether that's not using plastic packaging, not using synthetic fabrics, trying to use export reject fabrics to reduce waste. We just started doing that with not very strategically, just like that. And then after a few months of working, we were like, hey, we could be so much more sustainable throughout the supply chain. And so let's be more thoughtful about this. And also, since this is such an important value for us, let's also show it in our branding. Like originally, it definitely was not in our branding.
Yeah. So what is your product? And like you said, sustainability is something that you build, at various kind of levels and stages. So what is your product, and where does sustainability feature, and how do you amplify that message?
Sure. So, I mean, we are a sustainable and ethical fashion brand. So our products are, physical products. Basically, we sell clothes, accessories, all textile based, some paper based as well. And when I say sort of, I guess, like if you ask me what our main values are, it's definitely, ethical in the sense of working with our craftspeople, tailors and artisans in the most ethical way possible, in terms of how we pay them, in terms of how, you know, we treat them. So that's one. Then there's of course sustainability, which I mentioned, a sort of, you know, environment, like trying to minimize our carbon footprint through every aspect of the supply chain. So from sourcing fabric to production to sending it to the consumer. And then also, you know, some sort of consumer education on like how to,
Right.
you know, maximize the life of their clothes, or basically how to be sustainable even after they've purchased from us. So I would say those are the two main things. And of course, you know, we're both, like, it's a women run business, so I think we sort of, our branding or our marketing is pretty feminist. We try to also work with more women throughout the supply chain as well, even though it's actually very hard, but you know, we're doing what we can, baby steps.
Right. And you know, you know, because I follow your page on Instagram, I have seen a lot of advocacy and amplification of your marketing. Your entire marketing machinery and advocacy is kind of geared towards putting it out there, breaking down what sustainability really means on an everyday level, which is fantastic, you know, because there's another whole mammoth world of fast fashion that you're competing with, you know, which is what I want to come to next. So, you know, I mean, all of us are one click away from, you know, ordering whatever we want from a range and host of apps. And, you know, fast fashion is out there. It's arrived a while ago, and now it's fairly widespread. And there is, of course, there is a niche movement, but it's niche towards, you know, so thrifting is one kind of culture. And, you know, ethical fashion brands is all one, but it's still a small space. So, you know, absolutely. What are some of the challenges that you guys have faced, you know, and what's the nature of challenges that you guys have faced?
Sure. So I think couple of things. One, the sustainable fashion market in India is very small compared to Europe or even the US. So, you know, I lived in the US while doing my master's, and it's like, for lack of a better word, sustainability is trendy over there. Like every second brand is coming up with, like, you know, shoes made of some recycled material, or like clothes made of this XYZ. And, you know, and they're able to charge a couple of $100s for each item. And then there is a market that pays for it. So, you know, you're able to basically, like, essentially get started, and I don't know what make ends meet, but definitely grow your brand very fast. I think in India, awareness is a little less, and I would say not from, like, inherently, I think a lot of Indian habits are very sustainable in terms of, like, say, you know, using things, reusing things, hand me down. So all of that is very sustainable. But in terms of, like, thinking of what you purchase, also that maybe awareness is a little bit less. And India is a very price sensitive market, just because, you know, per capita incomes are lower. So you can't, I mean, sustainable stuff, unfortunately, is mostly more expensive. It just costs more money to buy organic cotton, or like to work with hemp or something that are, you know, more sustainable materials, for instance. So you have to end up charging a much higher price, and then, you know, you're not a mass market product. And if you're not a mass market product, you can never really scale or never go and, you know, impact many more consumers. So I think that's a fundamental challenge. So we're trying to push the boundary on that as much as possible. You know, from a business sense, we're minimizing our margins, honestly, as much as possible, so that we're trying to balance being a viable business, but also not pricing out everybody in the name of sustainability. We want to be at least a little bit more affordable. We're definitely not affordable in the whole Indian pricing scheme, but we're not a luxury brand either, and we don't want to be. So, like, that's one thing that we're doing. I think the second thing that we're doing, and this is like really close to my heart, and I think important to both, you know, Charanya and I, from an impact perspective, is that we know that we're not ever going to be like as big as like a fast fashion brand, and we shouldn't also. Like, that means we've, you know, we were not following our own principles. But is there a way for us to have an impact beyond, you know, just the customers that are buying from us, because that is still small, right? And I think that's where we're really focusing on this consumer education part in our marketing, so that, you know, even if, like, say we have 16,000 followers on Instagram right now, even if only like 1/10 or 1/5 of them actually buy from us, but there are many others that engage with us and are like, oh, you know, I can't afford you guys right now, or I still prefer XYZ other, you know, fast fashion brand, but you've made me think twice about my purchases, or you've made me check the label now, and, you know, not just fall for any brand's marketing. I think that's very impactful. It's very hard to measure, I think, systematically, but we do believe we can have an outsized impact on consumer attitudes through better branding. And that's what we've been doing from the start.
Yeah. That's fantastic. So tell me about, in your journey, how long has it been since you all started Tamarind Chutney? How old is Tamarind Chutney?
It's going to be 3 this year, but actually 2 years only, where both of us have been working full time, and both of those years have been in the pandemic. So it's been very eventful years.
Yeah. So, I mean, over the last 2.5, 3 years, what have been some of the biggest enablers for you guys? Where have you received the most support from, whether it may be just attitudinal support, or, whether it's resources and funds, where have you got that? Where has it been the biggest enabler for you?
Sure. So, I mean, I think I just want to start with being very transparent about the fact that, like, both Charanya and I grew up in Delhi. We are running an enterprise in Delhi. We live with our families, so we don't have to pay rent. So, there's just a lot of basic safety net kind of criteria that have been fulfilled that allow us to take this risk. Otherwise, I think it's really hard to just start an enterprise without getting investment or funding or, a big grant. So, there's no magic really. Like, it's just this sort of level of support, family support, that allows us to even start. Beyond that, of course, we're like really bootstrapped. There was, a couple of like small grants that I got from my master's program in the US. It was like meant to be, just like stipend money, but because like the like currency, Indian rupee is obviously weaker than the dollar, so that helped. And I think so those were the two things that got us started. And I think beyond that, we've been very lucky to just have a lot of people been wanting to talk to us and help us. If we like reach out, like, you send a cold email to somebody, whether it's like, Le latte abji ma'am of Dastakar, or we've even spoken to Kirti Punya of Okhai once, who are really like leaders in their field, and they both give us time at least for a call and give us advice. And that's like, it's been really helpful talking to various people. So that is helps, I would say, keep us going. Otherwise, honestly, being a bootstrap business, having two employees and having a bunch of tailors and artisans that you have to pay, like, that is like, the biggest self-regulator in terms of discipline. Like, you have bills to pay, so you have to take decisions accordingly. And it means we grow slower, honestly, but I think it's been helpful in terms of us being more, I would say, like less wasteful with our resources. So we've been, I don't know, like, we've been lucky that way. And I think, honestly, I also want to say that our customers are kind to us. Sometimes they give us orders and we take, like, especially like customized orders, and we take a little longer because we're small. They understand. We have great relationships with our artisans and tailors as well. So, most of the time, like, we never bargain, we pay them immediately and all of that. So I think because of that, they are also like, very sort of okay with us, in terms of like, okay, we might make a smaller order this time, or like, we'll give you a little bit less heads up than usual. So it's been, I would say, about like a lot of initial support from family, and then developing these relationships with the stakeholders we work with, so that we can, grow slowly.
So relationship building has been fairly key for you, and investing in those relationships, whether
it's been really important. And I would say that initially maybe it was a little hard, because while in fashion, actually, compared to other industries, there are many more women that work. There are not that many women that maybe deal directly with the vendors, or even interface with the artisans. So I think initially we were having this issue of not being taken very seriously because we're women, or we are polite. And I think that was a little bit of a slow process, but now it's I think all expectations have been set, and it's a great working relationship.
Okay, that's wonderful. And so something I thought I'd pick up and talk to you about is that a lot of the entrepreneurs and social enterprises and other community owned businesses that we've spoken to, when we spoke to them about imbibing sustainability in their products, in their production system all across. And when we spoke about what were the enablers and supported them and what were their challenges, very many of them have spoken about just the lack of just the lack of resources and also information, right, and support systems. And one big kind of gap that we've come to understand that many people have shared is in just this kind of nationwide ecosystem or support or schemes or policies from the government. So I just wanted to understand, what has been your experience in that, vis-a-vis funding, technology, communications, or anything related to the government that has helped your endeavor or that you know of.
Sure. So, I mean, I think there are many things that perhaps the government has done that are not related to sustainability or the apparel industry that have been helpful, and maybe even private sector. So for instance, the biggest help is that everybody's on WhatsApp. You can, thank maybe Reliance Jio for that or whatever it is. Everybody has a bank account. So I would say these sort of secular trends have really helped us, connect with artisans, order swatches of fabric online when we can't visit because of the pandemic or because we don't have the budget. So that way it's been really helpful. We have also been to the Ministry of Handlooms and spoken to a couple of people there who have shared their databases with us. So that's also been great. And that was something that we sort of, just like did on a whim and were not expecting very much. So those two things I would say have been really helpful. One set of secular trends and a little bit of like contacts that the government has. I would say in terms of challenges, in the sustainability space, I think there's not that much clarity. All sustainable materials are very, very expensive. There are I don't know, I'm not a policy expert here, or I haven't actually looked into the math of this, but there are no subsidies, there is no incentives on growing hemp or organic cotton. I mean, if anything, the production of synthetic fabrics like polyester is being promoted. So that's just, I think, an area where I feel like there's a lack, a coherent policy on textiles. And I think I was just doing a little bit of research a few months ago on the Niti Aayog's various committees on sustainability, and they are numerous, and textiles or fashion is not even one of them. So I think it just is perhaps not even in the radar, which I think is a little unfortunate and should change. I also think that perhaps civil society needs to come together a little bit and advocate. As somebody who's running a business, it's obviously never top of mind for me because, you're always firefighting and busy with operational stuff. But it would be so helpful. And of course, if there's any effort that I would, we would love to be part of it. But yeah, I think it's a bit of a challenge at the moment.
Yeah. And that's kind of commensurate with most experiences that we've heard of. I want to go back a little bit to something that you said before, which was about, it's interesting that, while fashion has the largest number of women-led businesses, when you come down the line, in the apparel or fashion industry, when you look at down the line, everything right from vendor to customer relationships to actually getting the work done at the ground level, you won't find too many women who are front-facing over there. So just to understand, has there been any impact, with the way whether colleagues or workers or teammates or even funders and people in general have, how they have engaged with you based on your social political identity, your gender, or your education? Has that ever had any bearing?
I mean, I think in terms of me personally, well, I guess I could separate in terms of me and the brand. So for me, I would honestly be lying if I said that, my identity as a woman is really impacting or I would say compensating for all the other privileges that I have here as a hyper educated, person, coming from financial privilege and socioeconomic privilege in general. So, but it has probably I definitely, I felt I wasn't being I wasn't taken as seriously by a lot of vendors, but I also feel that, there is, despite that, a power dynamic when, you know, you speak to somebody who's maybe a little bit more of a working class background, or, you know, running a factory or something. And I think like all these factors are at play together, and it's a little bit hard to just isolate that, okay, this person was not nice to me because I was a woman, or you know, so on. But I have, like, factually, I've been in situations where, you know, I'm the only woman in that room, or, you know, everybody else who's there for the orders is male. So I think that's definitely been there, but have a lot of other privileges, I think, to you know, I don't know, like that give access to spaces. From a brand perspective, we are, I would say, very out there with our beliefs, and we say controversial things as well, whether it's, you know, about like religious freedom or politics or whatever. And I think those are the times where we have maximum engagement on our social media. So we have maximum support and maximum hate or trolling or unfollows. And I think it's, the stakes get higher as you grow. We're still small, so the choice is still very obvious for us, is to, that it's worthwhile using the platform we have to amplify marginalized voices, or to sort of make a statement about things we believe in. But again, I'm not going to say that it's as easy for, you know, even us, like 6 months to a year later. Like, you know, if I just bring up that Fab India thing that happened, I even forgot. I forgot what their word was, but they'd use some Urdu word or something. Jashne Rivaz, right? And I think it's really easy for me to come out and say they should not have done that. But I don't have like hundreds of stores and thousands of staff around the country. And if anybody's attacked, you know, and God forbid anybody like dies because I refuse to take down that tweet, that's, or like, you know, to take down that campaign, that's like really tough, you know. So I think the trade-offs, like the, you know, in the sort of climate we're living in, on things that that are happening right now, the trade-offs are very hard. And it's easy for us right now as a small brand to be vocal, but it might get harder.
Yeah, thanks. That's a very interesting perspective, especially the one that you said about the power dynamic. You know, being aware that, you know, it is not always, I mean, gender is not always the other, there's an intersectionality that cuts through it. You know, that's really interesting. Thanks for pointing that out. I think something quickly I wanted to ask you, you know, was, you know, we were talking earlier about customer attitudes, you know, and receptibility of customers, and, you know, sustainable fashion still being a niche kind of area. You know, what have you noticed about, you know, just customer receptibility of customers, changing opinions, changing trends? You know, we spoke briefly, you said, yeah, it is a very niche market in India, but where do you think it's growing? Is it growing? And you know, is it sustainable for sustainable fashion groups, you know, to be in this space, considering it's a niche market?
I think, frankly, if you're like trying to, I don't know, build your next unicorn company, maybe you should wait 5-7 years before entering sustainable fashion. But I think we'll get there. In terms of, I mean, I'm joking, like in terms of, you know, fast growth like that. But I do think the market will shift in such a way that it becomes more, not mass, but at least more widespread or more mainstream. And I think you see that in the increasing number of brands that are now, you know, taking out like conscious like collections, or, you know, have like few things that are made of recycled XYZ, or, you know, like they're talking about packaging. I mean, Amazon, I think, has an option where, you know, you can send all your things in one box, or like remove plastic, or remove the thermocol. So I think there is an increase in demand. But going back to our point about government, is it ever going to be so much the increase, or is sustainability going to be so important that consumers are willing to pay extra? I think that's hard. I think that will always only be like the very elite, or people who have like a huge financial sort of safety net. And I think all of this goes back, honestly, to economic growth. Like if India grows more and there's more disposable income, people will be willing to pay a little bit more for sustainability. If not, I think then even though attitudes might change, there has to be a lot of regulatory support to make it more mainstream.
Yeah, absolutely. I think quickly getting just your ideas on the government and its role, and when it comes to kind of really, you know, you know, we've been hearing about entrepreneurship for a while now with the government's moves towards all these, with the PM Yuva Kendras and so many training institutes and programs and collaborating with other NGOs and opening up that space. But when it comes to enterprise, we're not sure. It's kind of vague. We don't really know what has been set up by the government. So just to understand, what, from your experience, what kind of support would it be particularly helpful or essential going forward to kind of foster this growth so that there can be more social enterprises like yourselves? What are those key areas of additional support that you think the government really should take a lead on and facilitate?
Sure. So I think
for anybody else,
Sure. So I think there's this conventional wisdom that it's been so hard to set up a business in India, and I know that this government has been working a lot on improving ease of doing business, and in many ways I've seen that so much of it is digital now. It's much easier to incorporate. It's much easier to get an export license. So I would say just many more steps in that direction for an enterprise would be great, and specifically for a social enterprise, I think any more, I would say, like, I don't know whether it's like cesses or subsidies. So for instance, if you're a small enterprise right now, you can get a certificate which can get you a discount in XYZ purchases and all of that. I think like having those kind of things for social enterprises would be really just amazing. And again, it's like, I would say this is a little bit probably like laissez-faire kind of approach. It's like, reduce the bureaucratic hurdles in terms of setting up would be like really good. And I think other things for me personally, like, is a little bit more like, I'm saying two separate things. One is like remove the red tape, and then the second is like to add a little bit more regulation, especially on the environmental and social side. So for instance, I think right now, like, there are just there's so much confusion on like how much I should pay my staff. Like I'm just unable to even just look through the government and like the rules and figure out, okay, is this person unskilled? Is this person semi-skilled? What is this? And how do I match it and all of that? And then, different states have different minimum wages and like all of that. So I would say in terms of like being a social enterprise, even just clarity of rules would be like really, really beneficial. And I haven't said like, grants or any sort of in-kind support and all of that. And I think that is probably like a little bit of a personal preference. I mean, I think my experience is that a lot of times that comes with red tape. So I think for me,
strings attached.
Yeah, strings attached. So I think for me, it's more like even like just the basic stuff that needs to be done to run a business and set up a business requires so much interaction with government. I think the government has done a great job in making it X% easier. Can we just have more steps in that direction?
Yeah. So what I'm also hearing is, of course, clarity on what are the regulations and rules that exist, but also some kind of handholding and orientation and capacity building towards how to navigate it. I mean, red tape is not going to go away.
For sure.
Considering the baggage that we come with, diversity that we come with, but definitely training and handholding and how to navigate that entire system.
Yeah, and I think the government sits on so much information. It's just not organized well. Like even the example I gave about the artisans, like that was not online. Like a few states have artisan databases that are online, and you can just pick up the mobile numbers or Instagram handles these days, which is very exciting. But there are 28 states or more, and so union territories, and there's just so much information, and all these governments have the information in their offices. It's just sitting there. So that's very specific to me. But like even in general across the board for enterprises, I think there are just so many rules, or there's so much stuff that would be helpful, that if it was digitized in a Control F format, that would be great. Yeah.
I think my last couple of two questions I have. I think one is, what's next for Tamarind Chutney? What are you guys looking forward to in the coming months, coming year? Where is your focus? And the second one is, what advice would you give other budding entrepreneurs like yourself who are inspired, who want to start something, of their own in their community?
Sure. So I think on the first part, hopefully this will be our first year that is not completely marred by COVID. I'm even scared to suggest such a thing, but we're very excited. Like the last couple of months, like touch wood, have felt like pre-COVID in terms of our sales and in terms of consumers wanting to, travel, get out there. So that I think that informs our optimism and excitement. So we're very, I think, excited to work with more artisans, add stuff to our collection, our regular artisan stuff, and also work with different fabrics like organic cotton and hemp, and just be, like look at sustainability through the supply chain. So I think basically our priority is to do what we were doing in the last couple of years, but better, because there's no lockdown, hopefully. I'm so scared even to say such things, because anything can happen. But that's on Tamarind Chutney. On advice to budding entrepreneurs, I mean, I think two things. One is that, like, it's important to basically balance pragmatism with idealism. So I'll first give the practical advice. I think it's being an entrepreneur is really hard. It's very lonely. Most of the time the work you're doing is actually administrative or running around, and it's not like very exciting work, but it's, the fact that you're building something, or the, passion that you have that really keeps you going. So like, be prepared for that. And also, figure out like your safety net, essentially. Like, it's not gonna, if you're funded, that's great, but if you're not, it's not going to be generating income for you, at least initially. So I think it's just important to think about that. And then once you've thought about that, I would say take the plunge. But basically a more nuanced version of that is, I think it's going to be scary, but there's always going to be people along the way to help you out. I think the only person, I think a lot of times, especially women, like, don't progress because of, I mean, there's so many systemic issues, but like there are also self-limiting beliefs. Like, you may not like send that email, or you may not like reach out to somebody because you're like, oh, but they're busy, or they don't want to talk to me. And most of the time that's not the case. I think people are happy to pay it forward, because I've been helped so much, and I would be very happy to talk to other people, give them advice, or even share contacts with them in this industry. So I think there are many people like that. So don't be afraid to, put yourself out there a little bit.
That's wonderful. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for conversing with us, and this fantastic conversation.
No, of course, I had a great time. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. Thanks, Tanvi.